can't complain about it anymore, can they?
Hmm. I mean, we could just be really progressive about this meeting and have it here in the town hall. Everybody just sits down and talks.
I'd rather not mess up the Armani suit.
Who paid for that suit?
Me?
Are you not entitled to a suit?
No worries, if you want anything brought up, you can just ping us. Right, if you think...
Zeno's sticking around, is he?
10, 4, 10, 10.
11, 42, 16. Bingo!
Mr. Squeezem, I'll leave the decision up to you where you want to hold this meeting soon as anybody else turn up.
Right.
Where's my hole going?
Talk up! Well, I believe
it's got to end the
that
shift.
we were expecting a lot more people to turn up for this, which is why we'd discussed using the actual conference,
I'm disappointed.
room here.
Conference room,
I
I'll
am
call it.
very, very disappointed about that because, you know, there's a lot of people who were initially bringing up concerns about the law book and everything else that are not going to be here to put their points across. How many seats did you say were up there?
That would be 8 seats.
8 seats. I'm happy to stand.
8 seats. Right. What about your
Obviously,
officer at
anyone
the
that's
door?
talking can stand at
right.
the projector, stand at the board.
The guys at the door there, have they got anything to contribute to all this?
I believe so.
User disconnected from your
yeah,
channel.
I believe they do. I know Officer Myers does.
I assume that's him just pulling up now.
Officer Myers is the one at the door, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Officer McLean.
Oh, yeah, that's Jimmy Boy.
Well, should we head up? Get this started?
Okay, we'll go upstairs, see what we can do with this.
By the way, I think you will whisper.
I'm fairly sure I am.
Yeah, I'm probably hearing you.
That's some right purple bus.
Well, put in your fucking hearing aid.
Or at least turn it on.
What?
Or turn it up.
Don't turn it up, that makes a loud whistling sound.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Okay, Mr. Squeezem.
Righty
We
ho.
don't want to go all nylon up.
Finally the desk is getting used.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it happens.
Jesus, no, I'm not taking that chair. That chair is close to breaking.
So when you get some contractors in here, Sanders table, they haven't seen much on the country.
Oh, dear God. Yeah, we need to get the contractors in here.
Mr. North, there's still a seat open here.
Be so kind and close the door.
Well, since we is doing it.
Oh, looks like Myers has offered to speak first.
I don't know, there's still a seat over here.
It's obviously, we all know why we're here.
Hang on.
Repeat.
I'm Chris Hansen.
Okay, good to go.
Okay, we all know why we're here. We're here to discuss the law book and any issues there is with it. Obviously, the decisions, if there's any major changes, I do believe they will not be getting changed at this meeting. We will have to present them to the higher of the government to get approval. But I do believe we will having the Honourable Justice Mr. Squeezem present. Any minor changes, I'm pretty sure we'll probably get them authorised straight away. I ask that you all don't speak at once to give everybody a chance to have a say. Then once I finish, we can open up the floor for questions. Again, don't talk all over each other. If you are happy with that, we'll get started.
I'm hearing no objections.
No objection there.
Alright, so first of all, we'll call this meeting to order. I'm going to go down the list of names that we have here. your name out. You bring up any that you have regarding discrepancies between SOP, PD SOP's law book, or anything you'd like to see changed in the law book, or anything like that. It's pretty much an open forum at this point. Just remember to be reasonable about what your requests are. And as I say, I'll call out your name, and feel free to stand up. So, we'll start with Officer Myers.
I've got nothing to say.
Appears I was misinformed. I was under the impression you might have something to bring up here.
Just want to say most of our stuff is probably going through our head of HR anyway.
Speak up a bit. Speak up.
Yeah, everyone make sure that you're speaking clearly so that everyone can hear.
I just want to say that probably most of our stuff is going through our head of HR anyway. We've all discussed our points, and I think he's going to bring them up. Apart from maybe Mixed Live and Tap, maybe.
Well, yeah,
Do we-
did the
Well, then
points,
this-
you can bring them up, of course.
Do we want
Indeed.
go with Ronnie first?
Well, we'll see what's been brought up to the head of HR first, then and then see if anyone has anything they want to add on after he's finished.
Okay.
Well, then-
Mr. Pickering?
Yeah. Well, I shall go to... The main things that I'm really here to talk about is more things that have been brought up in PD, or things we've noticed. There's things we're obviously doing in general to help reduce the discrepancies with the law book, and issues with charging people. In regards to actual things that were brought up, one of the main ones was actually brought up by Officer Tap in regards to the ticket system, in regards to the law of actually ticketing people for not illegally, but for parking their vehicles and not paying parking tickets for them. I don't know whether Tap has any more information he wants to spread on it, rather than me talking for him.
Just pretty much right now, there is no current law in regards to the whole ticket scheme. While the scheme was put in place, there was no law to give the citizens the proper, the ability to see what they would get ticketed for, what reasons they might get ticketed for, and so on. So that would need to be added into the law book.
Okay, well, I would suggest at this point, as far as parking and ticketable parking is concerned, there needs to be decisions made and definitions drawn up as to where you would actually need to pay for parking. Because I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to pay for parking absolutely everywhere.
Of course. Something we're planning from a PD perspective from this meeting is we're going to take everything from this meeting that we can obviously add influence to, and try and discuss things from inside of PD. So from a PD perspective, so we'll definitely in the meeting we'll talk about tickets and work out a reasonable means to where tickets should be given, where parking should be paid, things like the time frame that you have to pay a ticket, and even things like the fines, so that it can be not only something that we can go by, but something that can also be publicly available, obviously to the law book, to the judiciary, that everyone is aware of the repercussions as well for not paying their parking, which is also the important thing. So it's not just that we know about it, it's that everyone does.
Yeah, so I think we're in agreement that there needs to be some sort of definition with regards to ticketing people for, not paying for parking or anything like that.
Yep.
In regards to that, I put together actually a draft document.
Okay. Is that the one that you showed the
Yeah.
judiciary in the last week or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to add to that essentially a map of parking zones, no parking zones, and that sort of thing if you can. Also submit that to the judiciary for approval.
Alright.
I would just say that it would be anywhere that's a designated parking area, like that's marked up with the lines.
Yeah.
If they're parked there with no parking, then that's when we would issue a ticket.
And we were also discussing the fact that the ticketing would be obviously would be restricted to city limits. So if you're inside of a city limit, you have to be in a designated parking area and you pay for your parking. Obviously, if you're outside of a city limit, as long as you're parking safely and reasonable, it's as long as you're safe, it wouldn't be against the law to park anywhere.
Okay. Well, that sort of thing. That's
and things like as well.
yeah, that sort of thing sounds very reasonable. I mean, that being the case, we could use the city limits map to basically designate where you might get ticketed for parking. What's the word I'm looking for? Basically, out with the constraints of proper parking, as it were.
Yeah, we'd obviously parking on a driveway wouldn't obviously constitute parking as such, as long as the owner of the house is obviously aware, because that would obviously fall under a different issue. But
Of course,
the only obviously slight discrepancy would be at public buildings. Some public buildings, well, like the town hall, for example, not necessarily saying we'd ticket people for parking here, but as an example, it's not designated into a city region. However, it is a public area. There is public parking for it. So there's a couple of scenarios that we could be obviously work into it. The first one is we need to obviously make sure that it's clear that wherever you park, what constitutes that parking area, because whether it is the fact that it's signposted or marked off, whether it's just a lay-by at the side of the road, because obviously us as officers as well, we need to make sure we understand so it's clear when we come to ticket someone. It doesn't look like we're making up a ticket for the sake of it. And then,
Well,
of course,
yeah. I mean,
free parking for when there's nothing on, like Town Hall.
yeah.
You wouldn't charge people.
When we've concluded this mission, the minutes will be mission. Well, we are technically on a mission here to sort things out, but when we've completed this meeting, the minutes will be forwarded to the Chief Justice and senior government officials for final approval before anything actually happens. So, all the ideas that are brought up here will be forwarded.
So what
you
we'd do
mentioned
is...
the town hall.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned the town hall. I've noticed a lot of the court cases and stuff like that, the rear car park gets blocked off.
Yeah.
In case that limits parking. So how about from now, obviously we'll have to again go, is the rear of the building is for government employees only, i.e. EMTs, CLPD and the judges. Obviously we can all park behind there free of charge, but civilians have to park out the front and have to pay for parking outside the front.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, in a little
You think
self-interest.
about on the court cases, a lot of the time I turn up, there's no spaces left out the front because there's a large police presence. So if we park, the police, the EMTs and judges, government officials park out back. Yeah, well, everybody's vetted, so we know there's going to be no danger. There's going to be no car bombs on them and stuff like that. Obviously, if PD want to check cars as we're coming in, that's fine. It's part of the job. Then leave the front parking area for civilians, and they have to pay while they're parked outside the front.
Yeah, that would also help us as well when we're transporting, people that are going to jail from the courthouse. We could get them out through the back safely.
Exactly. You're going to have vehicles out there ready. There's a garage out there which you can pull vehicles into. It just makes your life a lot easier. If all your vehicles are back there, and not guys having to come out the front door, jump in the vehicles, drive round, remove blockades.
It's a good suggestion. I think the one thing that we probably want to be wary of is if we have vehicles parked around the back, obviously monitoring it for the fact that civilians wouldn't be able to park around the back. It would obviously put an extra strain on officers being positioned there. The only thing I would possibly take into account is maybe in regards to the town hall, we should we'll obviously bring this up in our internal PD meeting and draw up a draft for it. But the EMTs have their own designated area to park that's out the front somewhere. It might only be for, say, one EMT vehicle or two EMT vehicles, but it means that they are nowhere, they're not near any other vehicles, for example. It could be down at the bottom of the steps, just away from the steps. That, they can jump in their vehicle and they can go without having to go all the way around the back and potentially open a gate or have officers or any traffic in their way. They're there and open, ready to go.
Well, there's a nice area here. We can get the owner's permission.
Yeah, anywhere. It's just EMTs.
Yeah,
if EMTs are separate, they're there and deployed straight away. Even if, that is their base right there.
Yeah, I was saying, but if you look, there's a walled area there. If we can get the owner of that house, if anybody owns its permission, they could park on their own there.
Well, having said that, Lieutenant North, how long do you reckon it would take an EMT to run from the courthouse to the EMT HQ?
Not long, but it depends a little.
Yeah.
On the amount of people and everything, so hard to say, but not long. But in worst case, I would say EMT car would have to park across the road also.
Yeah.
I think the other thing it obviously
Might
helps is
actually be easier.
sorry. The other thing it helps is when you've got an ambulance, say, just out front. It is that snap second. It might be 30 seconds to run to the base and get your vehicle and bring it back. If someone falls unconscious or falls ill inside the courthouse, you want that EMT there and then with their vehicle. And of course, it gives everyone a sense of a bit more security. Having an EMT, even like an ambulance or whatever, there ready if something was to happen.
Can I
on site?
Can I bring something up? And I know this is probably going to be unpopular for my fellow officers, but I feel that there should be no ticketing here at the town hall. The reason being is that even over the last couple of times that we've had stuff going on here, I mean, we had to deal with a lot of different security issues that were going on, and worrying about people's car tickets is one less thing that we should have to worry about when we should really be worrying about the safety and security of the judge and everybody else inside here. Also, I feel by putting ticketing for the town hall, it might discourage people from coming here because maybe they just don't want to worry about paying a parking ticket. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
As Senator, I would agree with that since I'm somewhat representing the civilians that are not here. I actually concur with that opinion.
I think the benefit... Go on, Kenway.
No, I was going to say it's not a bad idea, but it still wouldn't make a difference. I mean, what we're discussing right now is where would we actually park anyway? Like, where would we park? Where would civilians park? Even if we wasn't to ticket them, the parking thing should still be the same, where we park round the back, civilians park at the front, whether we ticket them or not.
This is the thing, and I'd just like to couple what Mr. Wiretap just said with what Mr. Pickering has already said, that we are actually outside city limits here. So, essentially, as long as your vehicle is parked in a safe manner, they shouldn't have to pay for parking anyway. But as Mr. Killaway's just said, this part of the discussion is more about where we would have everyone park when attending court or any sort of meeting at the City Hall.
I think the other thing that comes into point though is this is a CLPD restricted zone. So, for example, if we look at another scenario, we have our CLPD base, and Rob's EMT headquarters. They've got very limited amount of parking spaces. I'd say they've got around maybe 3 parking spaces each. I know the EMTs have a slightly bigger parking area. They're not. Neither of those are in designated city areas. But what the parking isn't there for anyone to make any money. It goes to the governments and the local councils anyway. But what it does do is it kind of acts as a very slight deterrent to parking your vehicle there for ages. You know, for example, someone goes and parks their vehicle at CLPD headquarters. The problem is it's then something that we've got to keep an eye on. It's an extra vehicle there, and then any visitors that come, there's the vehicle that's there that's taking up a parking spot. Same as from the town hall. An advantage to charging for parking because it's a restricted area, a restricted zone, or a government designated area, is that people might start sharing rides, so they only pay a single parking fare. They might start taking the bus or the taxi, and that then, as you said, it might put a strain on us from a PD perspective to be managing parking, making sure people are paid, but also from the other side, if people are paying for their parking and they do start to, ride share and, like I said, take a taxi, it puts even less strain on us because there are less vehicles there, there is less traffic, there's loads less harm that could happen from that perspective. It's a lot safer on that ground with the less vehicles and better for the environment.
Well, I would say from a standpoint, at least when it comes to EMT space or parking spots, at least on main HQ, I see no problem people parking up for free. They might want to see a relative that's been injured or something like that. Only thing I see, if they park where they shouldn't park, they always have the opportunity to call PD and get the car towed.
Indeed.
Well, brings up a good point. Another point to discuss when we get around to it as well is the people parking in EMT areas.
Well, that goes basically under blocking an emergency vehicle.
Yeah, it's just, well, I don't know. I'll hold that until we've sorted out the parking side. Or the town hall discussion.
Okay, well, speaking of the parking side, does anyone else have anything to bring up on the subject of parking?
Yes.
I'm just going to bring up one thing that is a charge for CLPD, but it's not in the law book at all, and that's abandonment of a vehicle. It's a charge that we have, but it is not in the law book at all. I don't know if we want to bring it up as something that needs to be added or something that doesn't need to be added due to the parking ticket system.
Well, again, if we could get some sort of definition of abandonment as opposed to, improper parking. Mr. Pirouette here, maybe have an idea?
Well, one of my peons, Mr. Tapp here, has been working very hard on. We've taken every single charge that the CLPD has in our computer, and he's been working on descriptions for each of them. So there's a couple of grounds for it. We've also been looking through the law book to work out whether any of them are in there. And this will be something that we bring up in our meeting, but it's something for judiciary as well. The main grounds for it is, well, first of all, we're going to see if it's in the law book or not, and by that ground, civilians and us are going to be on the same level.
User joined your
when
channel.
It comes to knowing about the charges, but also we have felt that sometimes officers don't really understand the charge, and we want to make sure that they do fully understand the charge before they give it out, and having a description there available for them as well will help. So we're already in the process of getting descriptions for all of the charges, and when it's done and obviously looked through, we'll be able to send it off to you guys, which will obviously pinpoint all of the areas we think are missing from the law book, and brief kind of outline of what the charges are, or the brief description of what the action for the charge is, as more than more than what the charge is itself. If that makes sense.
Well, I mean, there is an argument to be made that a lot of people don't actually know what some of the charges are. So, at least a brief description of what the charge is, as well as the action for the charge.
Yeah, that is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we are doing descriptions of the charge itself.
Right.
We're not doing anything in regards at the moment. We're not doing anything of what you get charged with.
That's already listed in the crime list on in the forums.
Yeah.
That tells you the punishment of the crime.
Yeah, we'll be looking to basically have it so when obviously Tap's done his run through, I'll have a look through it as well, and other people will have a look through it, and we'll basically submit a list of descriptions. So on the government website where you can view all of the crimes, they'll have descriptions of them as well, and in the law book, so that they can look at them, and it's a lot easier and more approachable for civilians as well. And from our perspective, we don't really have an excuse then for not understanding a charge or thinking that we know something, because people do seem to misunderstand them.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to do with the subject of parking? Mr. Senator?
Just about the parking behind the town hall. I'm kind of talking in my own interest here as well. Just recently, I was being assaulted and, almost kidnapped. Would it be possible for a selected senator to park around back after a search, of course, as well? Since just the justices and police department were named in this.
Well, I would say that this would go under the heading of government officials. Since you are an elected senator, you are technically an employee of the Malden government.
All right, just needed clarification. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Pickering, what's the next item on the agenda?
Bear with me, sorry.
When did he become Canadian?
Say again?
When did Pickering become Canadian? Sorry.
A lot of the things we've spoken about already, the main one that came up was obviously the parking. A lot of the things that we've been discussing have more been internal things in PD, kind of mainly grey areas in the law book where the charges aren't there, and what it then means is we're not necessarily aware that the laws aren't in the law book. So it's kind of been affecting us a lot, and a lot of officers where they'll go to charge someone on the grounds that it's in our computer. And of course the problem with that is or the officer is following their guideline, they're following their SOP. Of course it then isn't in the law book. So they've gone through the process and realised it's not there, so technically and legally they can't be charging someone with it. So that's the main thing that we've kind of hit, which is why we're working on the stuff we are.
Well, I'm pretty sure when new civilians come to the island, they are told about this webpage, and I'm 99.9% sure they get told not everything is in there, so not to use it as the Bible.
Yeah, we don't. Sorry.
So using the argument that it's not in the law book, it may seem like a valid argument, but then, as their rights say, they have the right to come to the court. As long as your officers are following their SOPs and guidelines of the arrest procedure and giving out charges, if
user joined your channel
is not happy, then they bring it to court.
Unfortunately, we have a limited amount of time not that we can deal with someone, we just have a limited time that we want to be spending with someone arguing charges, and especially having to deal with a court case for the sake of charges. So a lot of the time we are getting it starts debates and issues where yes they could bring it up into court, but then that's a massive strain on our resources that we don't want to have to keep dealing with. And the problem is yes, people are told that the law book is not necessarily up to date, but it needs to be, and it needs to be because we can't be charging people with anything from our computer that isn't in a law book. A law book is the final say on something. It is the law of Malden, and we are here to uphold the law. And if we're here to try and uphold the law that isn't in the law book, technically that law doesn't exist by a legal mean. So we're protecting ourselves by not charging people on these things. Well, it was on the grounds of the parking that we've been discussing here.
Yeah, I understand the parking's not there. Can you give me an example of anything else that's in your computer but not in the law book?
Yes.
We're going through the list to make, and Tap's probably got a list of some already. But the thing is that there are a lot of them, and you know, it's not on anyone in particular, but you know, we can't go around telling people that the law book isn't 100% official, because that then it isn't a law book. And yeah, we're protecting ourselves here.
Yeah, I understand the point that you're trying to get at. Mr. Tap, how many items have you so far discovered that are not in the law book?
I seriously, there's probably 113 charges, 114 charges. Probably about 35 of them are done so far. I got about 4 or 5 that are definitely not in the law book. I got ones that they mention it
User
in the law
left
book,
your
but
channel.
Don't go into a description of what it is.
User
For
joined your
example,
channel.
CLPD restriction zone. It's mentioned about it in the law book, but it doesn't actually describe what the CLPD restriction zone is, where it's at, or anything like that. So there's things like that that need a little bit more updating, so that a person goes, okay, so it's a restricted zone. What makes it restricted
User
zone?
left your channel.
Because there's nothing that
User joined your
talks
channel.
about it. But there's a few charges like that that they briefly mention something about it, but do not go into detail or describe that it's against the law to do it. So I'm trying to do is the easy ones I can that are clearly listed. It's the ones that are kind of confusing to just just me too, just reading over them and being like, well, isn't that charge pretty much this charge and blah 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 blah.
All right, so practical upshot is that CLPD has got a plan in action to bring the law book up to date with the charges that you actually have.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Kind of. Well, we've got the grounds to discuss it and work out and advise on things that we feel are missing. We definitely don't have the intention to take the whole law book into our own hands. Well, that would be in a conflict of interest anyway.
Of course, yeah.
We're here to obviously suggest things, and not only will we be bringing up things that aren't in the law book, we'll be bringing up things that aren't clear. And you know, not just being nitpicky on things, but there are some charges that are quite complex in regards to there's lots of ways we can charge someone for an incident, and having something that's just very general and kind of an overlook of a charge in the law book won't help people. And you know, if that tiny thing isn't in there, it looks like we're adding a charge. If you get what I mean, or we're adding something that to them just doesn't exist. So we'll look into those bits as well, things that are there but aren't necessarily clear.
Okay, so on the list of charges missing from the law book, I assume that will be passed up through the judiciary to the government for final clarification before it's actually, before the law book is actually edited.
We're going to be sending it through PD multiple times, discussing it in our own meeting, and then it'll be copies of all the different iterations will be sent through, and everything we've done on it will be sent up.
Okay. Right. So what's next on the agenda? Is there anything else?
Not off the top of my head from me.
Okay.
A few things that maybe, and this is going back to the last conversation that we had. This also relates to the last court case that we had versus Dan, in which I think we did win. However, going through the law book, I was looking, and nothing in there states that, if you have more than so many weapons, it actually states in the law book that if you have more than so many weapons, that the only charge that can be given to you is arms trafficking. And it literally lists that as just arms trafficking. That you can't, there's no other charges that you could actually add to that. So those types of...
It also states that any items under that one becomes illegal items. Hence how we won the case. How PD won the case.
I'd have to read back into it, but I was just reading the other night.
I believe that was Mr. Squeezin that took the case.
Indeed.
It did state that any items found under the charge of arms trafficking become illegal items.
Basically, it covered any items related to the charge of arms trafficking, which would have been all of the weapons, and then as such all of the ammunition for those weapons. But again, as I remember the case, the main reason you guys actually won it was because he wasn't carrying his little shop around with him.
Yeah, correct.
Had he been carrying that shop around with him, as per the law book, you wouldn't have been able to charge him for arms trafficking. Again, that's just looking at how it is worded in the law book.
Yep. Another thing brought up, wearing masks inside city limits. It seems that, and maybe this is the case, that something happened during the transfer over from Clickies, but the old Clicky did mention it, that masks were not allowed to be worn inside city limits. However, the new Clicky the new law book does not mention it. It just says that civilians are allowed to wear masks.
Okay, and as I understand it, there is actually a charge for wearing a mask inside city limits, is there not? And refusing to remove it.
To comply.
Okay.
But yeah, then again, can you get them for failure to comply if the law book actually states all civilians are allowed to wear masks? It does not state, but not in city limits.
Well, technically, the way it's worded at the moment, if it simply states that all civilians are allowed to wear masks, and does not give any restriction on that of where they're not allowed to wear masks, then being asked to remove a mask in any area is not going to be a legal order, and therefore they don't have to follow that order.
Yeah, it just states citizens have the right to cover their faces with any kind of mask or hat.
Yeah. So that's another one that will float up through the Chief Justice and the senior government officials to see which direction they want to go on that one.
And on that one, you might want to add official buildings also, since, per law, you're allowed to wear a mask in here.
Indeed. Well, that's the way it is per the law, but I'm not sure about the court rules. I believe there's something in the court rules about not being allowed to wear any sort of headdress. But again, that's something that can be clarified pretty much by floating it up the chain of command.
Yeah, I think the big thing from us will be once I'm done all these laws, and then we'll pass it to you guys to take a look. Maybe Daniil, from a citizen side point of view, has some things he wants to brought up.
Oh, I have plenty of things.
Before you do, Mr. Senator, Commander Killaway, I believe you were trying to say something a moment ago.
It's gone now. I think it was just about the masks and just having it clarified that we can ask people to take it off within city limits. I think that's just what I was going to say.
Yeah. Again, we'll put it through the Chief Justice and the senior government officials and see which direction they want to go with that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was just an error when transferring the law book over, but it may have just been overlooked.
Yeah, it was definitely in the old law book, however, not in the new one.
Okay. Mr. Pickles?
Even though it's worded, you have the right to ask them to remove it. They just don't have to.
Yeah. Mr. Pickles?
Oh, I was just going to bring something else up. I was just saying I've got another topic to bring up after.
Okay.
When we're around to it.
All right. Mr. Senator, your view on masks?
Um,
Coverings?
I believe that there is no reason to cover your face in a mask. I know it is a right, and the citizens will not be happy if that is infringed upon. However, there is no reasonable ground to cover your face unless you are wanted or have an outstanding warrant. So I believe, just from a civilian point of view, having a mask on inside a city, unless you're endangered for some reason, as in somebody is actually out trying to do you harm, unless that is the case, there should be no reason to cover your face inside city limits. I have heard public opinion that it makes many of the citizens actually uneasy, that they are always being approached with citizens wearing masks that just refuse to reveal who they are. Many of them feel like they are about to get robbed whenever that happens, so I think that is actually more of a cause for alarm for most citizens these days.
Okay, well, your comments have been noted on that, and again, they'll be passed along with the rest of it. Anyone else on the subject of mask and face coverings?
Just a quick one that popped in my head. How would that, if you say not allowed to wear mask within city limits, how would that affect the MTPD? Like medical masks.
I don't think we can remove the right to cover your face. Full stop.
No, I don't think the right to cover your face will actually be removed. As far as EMTs and PD wearing masks inside city limits, even if that is reinstated, I think for operational reasons, I think masks can still be worn by EMTs and PD in city limits, if there is a valid reason to do so. So, for example, ETU on manoeuvres or EMTs at, for example, a viral outbreak or something like that.
I think the best thing to add on that is that they should have the right to cover the faces, but when within city limits, it's a legal requirement to remove it when asked to by the CLPD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And if they don't, they'll just be charged with failure to comply.
Yeah.
That's how it was before anyway, wasn't it?
I think that's the best course of action to take on that one is, they've still got the right, but it's a legal requirement if requested by a CLPD officer to remove the covering, they must remove it.
I think we got to also take into consideration what Neil has just said based off the citizens' input, is that if you just see a bunch of masked men around you, you start getting nervous, start worrying about, oh, now I'm going to get robbed here. So there's a bunch of masked people running around.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something in that, and again, it'll be looked into along with the Chief Justice and the senior government officials.
Or you're a badass motherfucker who's not scared of anyone.
The wall's talking.
The wall is talking. You can come in.
No, I'm fully armed. That's the answer.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so anyone else have anything else they want to bring up?
Yes.
Mr. McSlife.
Yep.
No, we can't have potatoes.
Unfortunately not.
Spud gun.
So, I was speaking to this about a few officers, PD, before we came here. Currently, in CLPD and in SOPs, we are required to wear body cams, whether that be body cam, GoPro, and or the, I think the Pascal glasses or the Google glasses. They actually have a camera attached to them, and without that, our evidence is basically void, because there's no evidence there at all. However, I don't think there is anything for civs and or EMTs. So when it comes to, let's just say, for we have to wear the appropriate device to actually show the recording. Yet, anybody else currently, from what I understand, do not need to actually wear one. So I would be looking into, either clarifying, actual requirements to wear one, or if it was adjusted somehow. Because if we have to actually have a physical device which shows us recording, which is actually the device which is being recorded from, and then people, magically have recordings that they can use as evidence in court, for example.
Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you said that was within your SOPs you have to wear one of those.
Yes.
Okay, I understand that. Now, unfortunately, that's an SOP, that's not a law, so how can we make a law that forces people to wear electronic devices for recording purposes?
I think it may not be specifically, in the law book. However, let's just say in the judiciary, what form of evidence being collected. I don't think any of us really have any issue actually wearing any of them. However, people wearing, not actually having one at all, and then they're magically having evidence inside court cases, and then that's being used.
In this day and age, they could have one of these goddamn high-tech cameras that's the size of a button.
Yeah, and I do actually know quite a few civilians who have lapel cameras, basically just buttonhole cameras that you don't even see them wearing. So
it's mainly on the grounds of the fact it is an SOB, but it wasn't brought in by command. It was something that was forced on us by the government, and we're being forced to be able to physically prove that someone's being on camera, whereas anyone else doesn't, is the main issue that people are having. No one else has to legally see that they're being recorded or anything like that. We have to have the physical large device there in order to have any valid GoPro evidence. And as I said, that's not something that we brought in. It may be an SOP, but it's an SOP that was brought in by the government, so therefore it was made in a law-styled way. So there definitely can be a law made about it, because it was judiciary or it was the government that brought it in the first place.
Well, I believe that the SOP regarding the wearing of body cams or some sort of visual representation that you are recording at all times is essentially just to prove to any civilians that you do encounter that you are maybe arresting or detaining or what you're dealing with in any way, that any situation is being recorded, and that way that they do not have the power to turn around and say, well, this officer wasn't recording this, therefore they can't, they got no evidence against me.
Yeah, couldn't you say that? Let's just say if it was a civilian instead of a cop that said that. Like you say in the court case, you're trying to.
Well, as I said, there are an awful lot of civilians who use like I said, the more or less invisible forms of recording people, lapel cams. They can have little cameras sewn into their hats, or basically anywhere on their body that can record things. They're not actually required to, announce that they're recording anything.
Well, neither are we.
Does that not? Yeah, does that not mean that we could just have hidden cameras or whatever you want to call them, instead of the actual physical device on our shoulder? Because we was told by, well, the president, whatever you want to call him, is that without this on our shoulder, we cannot use our GoPro as evidence. So...
And that's regardless of whether we claim we got a small one.
But there is a difference between civilians
I'm saying nothing.
and government officials, so...
However, if in the case of evidence in a court case, that would be my opinion unjust, because how, if we're being have to physically show we're recording everyone and that we actually have a device, compared to civilians where they don't need one, yet it was upon us by the government to wear one in the first place, even though long before that, it was fine because everyone could be recording.
Well, again, your comments have been noted on this. They will be passed up to the senior government level, and we will see what can be done, either what can be done or what will be done about it.
Well, besides that, nothing else to say.
Okay.
I've only got one other slight thing to bring up.
Okay, Mr. Pickles.
It's in regards to cases. I think I think they are people are getting put off by cases because they're not worded correctly for every scenario, and for the situations we have, they're perfect, but they're too minimal. So a civil case request is for small disputes, business disputes, falling outs with people. Obviously you can sue for a large amount, but they are on the grounds of a civil, as they are called, a civil dispute, a debate between two different people or two different parties. In regards to someone having to sue, for example, the CLPD or an organisation, that puts them on the grounds of it being a civil dispute, which isn't correct anyway. And then from regards to a criminal case request, it locks it to 10 or more hours when somebody pleads not guilty, and the CLPD have to apply for it. So the main one is if we take the criminal case request. First of all, I think 10 hours is too extreme. A lot of our charges are capped at 5 hours anyway. I feel criminal case request should be available from the 5 hour mark as well. So it's on a flat level there. I also feel that in regards to a criminal case request, that it should be available to the person that's being charged as well. So that if they disagree with charges, they don't have to go through the process of it being a civil dispute, which it isn't. It is a criminal case request in that regard, and I don't think the CLPD should be the only people that are available to bring them forth.
I definitely agree that I think 5 hours would probably be a better time. I think we'd see a lot more criminal cases actually coming through.
Well, this is the thing, because I'm very confused by what you just said, in as much as somebody disputing an arrest or disputing the crimes that they're being charged with being a criminal case, because it's not a criminal case. They are disputing what PD has said, and therefore have a civil dispute with PD.
But that wouldn't make it a civil dispute. The reason it's a criminal case and not a civil dispute, because a civil dispute is in regards to a form of a small claims court all the way up to a dispute between two parties. Now you might sit there and decide in your opinion that it is a dispute. That is what any form of court is. No form of court is not a dispute, whether it's Going to court to get custody of a child, you're there to dispute who should have custody of the child. All court cases are a dispute of some form. The reason it is a criminal case request when it is of a set amount and somebody is arguing their charges is because they're arguing it on a case, on a criminal case. They are being brought in as a criminal. The CLPD are trying to charge them. They disagree with the charges, therefore they are there to defend themselves from the charge of a criminality. And I don't think it's right that it's only on the CLPD's ground to take them to court. They should also have the right to. Because the reason for that is, say for example it got dropped down to the 5-hour mark. Somebody has a charge for 5 hours or more for something and they plead not guilty. Now, the CLPD take them... the CLPD are doing this, but the problem is it's still going to hit that threshold. It opens the fact up that the civilian needs to have the right to argue it, and it's still a criminal case by that point. It can be done and dealt with there and then as part of the procedure for them to be arrested. A civil dispute, they have to... 90% of the time when a civil dispute happens, somebody has already served their jail time, and that could potentially not be at the benefit to anyone. They've served their jail time, which could be proven incorrect, and the CLPD then have to pay a load of compensation, which for the sake of a criminal case request, the whole thing could be dealt with. The person may not serve any jail time. The CLPD don't have to pay out thousands and thousands more than they need to because someone was incorrectly incarcerated, because they never got the right in the first place to argue their case until after they've been charged. If that makes sense. Because that's what a civil dispute ends up being.
So basically, what you're saying is that criminal cases should be those brought to court before you put somebody in jail.
Correct.
So what would you suggest in that case? I mean, let's just say, for sake of argument, that the time limit for criminal cases is brought down to 5 hours. Would you then let that person go?
Correct.
To await a court date for those charges, and then, I don't know, if they don't turn up to the court case, then arrest them and charge them with all the previous charges, as well as I believe it's a contempt of court for not showing up or for failing to appear at a summons.
So
That's not a bad idea.
Well, we would use it on the same grounds as a search warrant. So we'll go by a search warrant is the fact that they get put into max pen, and we have 24 hours to apply for a search warrant, or we have to release them. Now, in regards to a criminal case request, we would border it between the minimum time, which is 5 hours, hypothetically thinking, of course, and if they're within that 5 hours to the time that they would say up to 10 hours. So between 5 and 10 hours, they would be released on tag for 24 hours. Otherwise, we would maybe put it under the same rule of it as a search warrant, where maybe they do serve their jail time instead. I don't know. This is just me discussing these points because maybe it brings light to someone else. But say if it does, just go to them being tagged up. They'll be released upon tag for 24 hours. That 24 hours we have to apply for the criminal case request, but we would still apply for the criminal case request on their regard, but they have asked for it. It's not us having to go to the commander of our side, it's they have demanded a criminal case request. We've given the 24 hours tag, we apply for the case request on their behalf, under SOP rules and stuff and regulations, so that it definitely happens. And they obviously come along to the court case. And yes, if they don't turn up to the court case, they're obviously tagged up. But if they don't turn up, then we'd take them as an immediate, not guilty but proven guilty plea, if that makes sense. Because they've lost their chance by that point, and contempt of court and whatever else the Justice Department would agree on.
This would probably only happen if they pled not guilty, though, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah, it would. Because obviously if they plead guilty, they've already pleaded their guilt to a charge. We don't need to prove anything on that regard.
So that would also help us out as well, because we could just say, if they plead not guilty, we could just say, right, okay, then, well, we're going to release you on tag, but you're going to be called up to court. And then that way we can get our evidence together rather than showing it there and then, which in a lot of cases we struggle to do, depending on what the evidence is.
Okay, well, I can see a couple of issues here. First of all, Justice Parker, on average, what would you say is the response time for the judiciary responding to either criminal or civil cases, and actually getting a court case set up?
I would say on average it's between 48 and 72 hours.
Okay, so that would basically...
We know that needs to improve.
Yeah, well, that
puts the strain on us.
Yeah, but that would basically negate the 24 hours on tag, because, you know, if they only tag for 24 hours and it takes longer than that to actually have the case seen at court, then the tag's pretty much useless.
But the problem with that is, at the moment, everything's dumped on the CLPD. The civilian has very little right to argue their case before they've even proven anything. This gives an opportunity to give the civilians a lot more rights. This gives the CLPD a much more fair, and between the civilians and the CLPD, a much more fair environment for them to both work in and be able to prove their guilt or their innocence or whatever.
Right.
So it shouldn't be anything.
Let me see if I can clarify what's actually being proposed here. If somebody is arrested for charges totaling more than 5 hours, they would be processed. They would be obviously taken back to PD and questioned. Obviously read their rights.
You sound like you're talking through a walkie-talkie. I do apologise.
Yeah, well, it's just my voice at the moment. But they would be taken back to PD, questioned, and then released. Only if they plead not guilty. If they plead guilty, then they obviously would go straight to jail.
Yes, correct.
If I'm getting this correct.
Yes.
So if they plead not guilty, they would then be released on bail, either by means of a tag or by means of keeping paperwork on them. And then you would put up a criminal case request to the courts. The court would then hear the case and decide on the penalty for the charges.
Yes.
All right. So I'm pretty much on the mark so far. If that suspect then failed to appear at court, a bench warrant would then go up on that suspect, which I believe would appear on the police computer. So that the next time he is encountered by PD, he would be arrested and jailed for the police computer, the computed time for his original charges plus contempt of court.
Yes,
that's basically what's being proposed.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that proposal will go up through the Chief Justice and on to senior government to see if that's even possible. In the meantime, I suggest that PD continues to operate as they have been.
Oh, we won't.
As far as
we'll obviously
as far
sit
as
down and do it on our regard, make up a kind of a write-up from our side, so we can, have something at least so we plan our logistics and how it would work from our perspective.
Now, as far as people disputing charges that amount to less than 5 hours, how would you propose dealing with them?
Well, for simplicity to start with, I don't see the problem with the civil dispute. However, I feel that at the moment, it being called a civil dispute opens it to confusion, because it's a very open and very quite difficult to understand. I feel that either there needs to be a middle ground as such between a civil dispute and a criminal case, kind of that middle ground styled case where it's clear that it's for arguing cases against the COPD that don't attain to being not guilty in over the 5 hours, or there needs to be some sort of more publicly available information on what a civil dispute can be, rather than it kind of going down to interpretation of it just being, say, an argument between mates. Because I think a lot of people miss out on things. You know, they don't feel that they don't feel it's right, or they don't feel that they can go to court because they don't feel that they fit the description, if that makes sense, for a certain thing.
All right. Well, like I said, I mean, these proposals will go up the chain of command, and they will be discussed, and we'll try and make a decision on how best to move forward with that. Does anybody else have any comment on this subject?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Senator.
It's more about clarification. So, if somebody is released on tag for, let's say, a violent crime, would that also include a gun ban?
It would be in relation to their charges. I mean, when we go with the logistics, if we're proving, if we're taking a criminal case request for a terrorist, and they plead not guilty, then by public interest, we can't just release a terrorist on tag. So there'd have to be some sort of regulation, some sort of a guideline to the fact of a say a violent crime, which other examples exist on that regard. For example, you can't apply for parole, certain types of parole when you've got violent crimes as part of your parole. So that could in effect be a similar system in regards to the civil case requests, where if it's a violent crime, that yes, we would take that into account. There would be extra limitations. It wouldn't just be released on tag.
Okay.
Because, yeah, they could be violent. They could be dangerous.
Right. Yeah, that's what I had in mind. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, along with this proposal, a list of bail conditions needs to be drawn up and set.
Yeah,
it could go along the parole lines, couldn't it?
They could very well do, yeah. But again, we'll see what the lads up the ladder have to say about it.
Aye.
Yeah, we'll draw some stuff up and discuss it within the PD. Work out how we'd be able to work it in PD, and obviously send it through to you when it's all available.
Okay. Anybody else on this subject?
Partial on this subject. So it's actually something I've actually been thinking about for a little bit now, and especially when I came across it in the law book. The law book states that either you're charged or you're released. If you're released, all warrants, all crimes, everything like that needs to be voided. I think that needs to be looked into, and possibly soon. The reason being, there's times that, and I know it's a big thing for the civilians, you guys don't want to be held for an hour, and especially if there's a big thing going on, if there's a lot of evidence we got to go through. If we release you, then as it states right now in the law book, everything's supposed to be voided. However, to not keep a civilian in for a full hour, or if we know it's going to be a long thing, I feel that if we're releasing them, that we still have the ability to charge them with the crimes. And I know that the president has brought this up, and his word has also been before. If you can't charge them with an hour, release them and let them go until you can gather up the evidence. But like I said, as it states in the current law book right now, if you release a civilian without charging them, everything needs to be voided.
I think on the ground of that, it's the more clarity to being able to pinpoint when someone's being detained for questioning or as an interrogation, rather than them being placed under arrest. Because being restrained or being under arrest, they're different, and it's, from our perspective, making it obviously more clear that obviously, you know, they do know that they're detained under questioning. For example, it brings up a slight thing is when we read rights, because we still technically read someone their rights, even if we brought them in for questioning. Now that puts the limit because the hour's still there. Once we always sorted out their rights, that's implying that we're going to be charging them in the current state, and that yes, we wouldn't just release them after an hour's questioning to, process them at a later date.
Okay, well, just going on Mr. Tapp's comments here, I believe that that sort of clarification would come from the review of the proposal on the table at the moment to actually catch and release pending criminal cases. So I think that can all be dealt with in one lump.
Yeah, I think because especially if you're releasing, chances are then the reason why you can't get the evidence all done in 1 hour is because there's a lot of stuff to go through and a lot of things happen. Whereas, if someone's just like shot someone, you got that done, recorded, you can show that evidence right away. But if there's multiple things that happened over a long time span and you have to go through that type of evidence, chances are it's probably going to be a 5-hour charge maybe that needs to go through the judicial system anyway.
Yeah, this is why doing the PD paperwork is so important, and getting it done there and then is so important, because then you've actually got the ability to look back over like previous warrants, previous arrests, and all that sort of stuff, and get the evidence on the stuff that's not yet been resolved.
Which is sometimes there's a limitation, when you've got something happening, you may not have that 5-10 minutes of your shift to be able to stop and write a report, and again that's 5 to 10 minutes per report. You might be called out, you might be chasing this person for an hour, and you've caught them, and the charges that are against them has been in that hour. So the problem there is, well, you've done those charges for an hour, and now you've got to work them out there and then because you've only just caught them. If that makes sense, it's not always the case where you've got the charges already written up.
The other situation that you get into with them, and I'm just going to use the example of what was about a month ago when we were getting shot out by Korn and them at the substation. A lot of times when big things happen, sometimes a lot of big things happen at one time. So while a few officers might be on one thing and we got someone detained and arrested for charges, something else goes on down the line. So those officers are pulled away and called to that other incident. Now, getting that evidence from them other officers is difficult for me to place these charges against this person because they're now dealing with another crime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been an issue, but again, if the evidence is being uploaded straight away, or if the evidence is even being streamed live, then there's always the ability to basically cherry pick the evidence and get it as soon as it's made available. But again, I see your point, in as much as some situations just snowball and there's nobody there to do the evidence, which is basically why the person with the evidence really should be the one that's actually dealing with the arrest. And this is something that I've heard has happened a few times, in as much as the person with the evidence has made the initial arrest and then passed it on to someone else without passing on the evidence first.
The main thing is, as well, is it's not the evidence that takes the time, even uploading it. The time is getting the charges and making sure the charges are right, and that's the most important part of it. Because, even if they plead, take into account that the majority of people are going to be pleading guilty, it's just making sure those charges are correct. And the problem is as Tap said, when people get drawn away, is getting hold of officers and trying to get the charges off them and having to run out the room and run back in, and it becomes a mess, and that does take time. And yes, some people will take long for getting the evidence, but if you say you do have a knife,
I think the change should happen or be worded that if someone has been released, say they've only spent like 15 minutes or so in custody, and we've decided, you know what, we just don't have the evidence correct right now, we don't have it ready to go, that we should be able to, we can release, this stuff is not voided, but we can put a warrant out at a later time for their arrest.
Yeah, but that would go under what we just discussed.
Yeah.
Where if they pled not guilty, we would just say, right, okay, well, you know, it's going to have to go to court. We file for the court case, they get released. We have plenty of time then to get all our evidence together and our case. It goes to court. If they turn up, you know, then we present our evidence, they present theirs. And if they don't turn up, the warrant goes up for their arrest, and we go and get them.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the current book says, it says if you're either charged or you're released. That is the two things out of the current book. Your citizen's either charged within an hour.
Now, and it states citizens may be detained for 1 hour, period, like evidence is reviewed, and they must be either charged or released.
Yep.
Now, it doesn't state in there that you have an hour to charge and provide all the evidence. It just says you've got an hour to review the evidence and charge them. Now, with my understanding, once you charge somebody and you've read them right and you're then charging them, I believe that 1 hour, then that 1 hour timer is then void. You could sit there for 4 hours arguing the case.
Yeah, no, that is correct. As soon as you've read them, as soon as you've listed the charges, it's their time to give the plea. Obviously, there's a limit to, you know, when they're pleading not guilty and you're sorting out all the evidence and stuff. But it's on their time at that point. If they're making things difficult, or if they're wanting to discuss every single thing individually or whatever, then yes, the time would.
Yeah, but
I agree with that.
Sorry, just 1 second. As Justice Barker's already said, once you've actually read those charges, that 1 hour timer stops. So as you say, they're eating into their own time then, and then they've got nothing to complain about.
Yep.
But they're also eating into our time.
So if they plead not guilty, then we do actually have time to go through the evidence and stuff.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Right,
Once you've
my
read them their
thing-
charges, read them right and read them the charges, that 1 hour timer then ends.
Then that's where that's where the idea of the criminal case, you know, style changing is kind of linked to that. Because it might be into their time, but if you're still having to prove, you know, 5 odd hours worth of evidence, that's going to take you forever. And so they're linked.
Yeah, that SOP would just have to be worded different.
It should be. It's in the detainment SOPs. It might be in a few places, and it needs to be kind of. This is where we're discussing the fact that we need to look through the SOPs and streamline them so everything's a bit easier to find what you're looking for. Because there are certain things that fall under about 3 or 4 different SOPs, and then the problem is you're finding something that's brief and is actually explained somewhere else, or sometimes it isn't explained anywhere.
If I may add, it's also it's not just in your SOPs. I do not know your SOPs, of course, but it's also under the citizens' rights, that time limit, and if you're charging a civilian, you have to provide proof.
No, you don't.
Yes, but
If they plead guilty, you don't.
No, if they plead guilty, of course not. But as it says in the rights section G.6, if a suspect requests evidence to prove guilt or accusation, it should be provided. Failure to do so should nullify any guilt or accusation.
We're not arguing that point.
Okay.
We're arguing the point of the 1 hour detainment.
Okay. Does this not intersect?
I can understand what everybody's saying here. I don't know if maybe I'm saying it wrong or something. So if we take, for instance, the other day when Dan and Zero Toxins killed all of PD or whatever, I was murdered, blah blah blah. In that situation, because there was so much stuff that happened, and if they were arrested, we would not have had enough time to go through all the evidence, all the video, and start time-stamping stuff to say, okay, here's the crime, here's a crime, here's a crime, because there was so much stuff that went on. In that situation, what I think should have been done, if it happened like that, was we'd be like, okay, we're releasing you, and we're going to put a warrant up for your arrest later at a different day. We don't tell them that or whatever, but because because if we just let them sit there in the interview room the whole time, and if I'm the arresting officer, and they're just sitting in the chair, and I'm just sitting in the chair, going through 45 minutes, 50 minutes, of video from 3 different people, then I'm not interacting with them. The role play is dead at that point. And it's hard for me, and if they start talking, then I can't concentrate on what's going on. There should be a fine line of that. We could say,
sorry,
we are allowed to release you, but we can put up a warrant for your arrest at a later date.
It just doesn't make sense letting someone go that's just killed a bunch of cops.
Well, that's
which is again where the 1 hour limit comes in. Once you've read the charges,
get the list of charges done in an hour. There's something wrong.
But
it's
the other thing is,
only your charges. You don't need to timestamp evidence at that
it's
point.
It's just the charges you've got to get in that hour. Once
If
you've got
they
a list of
disagree with the
charges, you read them right, give them the charges. At that point, that timer is null and void. It doesn't exist.
Okay.
But the main thing, this is what we were saying. This is where it links into. This is why I was talking about being able to put someone on tag, prove their innocence in court, rather than having to prove something there and then. That's
Yeah, I agree. I really agree with that. But we'll see.
We just need to work it all out.
Okay, anyone else on this subject? Silence is the lead reply. Anything else anyone wants to bring up?
I do have, as we've been talking about tags, I would like to see that used a lot more. Maybe we, for not major crimes, but I can't really think of an example, but basically at our discretion, if it's just like a minor crime, just put them
for
on
example,
tag.
maybe failure to pay speeding tickets or something like that.
Just small things. Like
User joined your channel.
Say, for example, they're doing something in a town somewhere, and we respond, and they're acting like an idiot, basically. We could take them back to PD, arrest them, and rather than put them in jail, just give them tag time, but then say to them, look, if we catch you in that town within your tag time, like an hour or whatever it may be, we will come and find you and rearrest you, and then you'll serve the jail time.
So something basically akin to a antisocial behaviour order, then?
Yeah, because
probation.
I think it would benefit the civilian. They wouldn't need to go to jail for, minor crimes. Obviously, we could use this at our discretion. If they give us a good time and whatever else, then just use the tag, and we're happy, they're happy, and if they break the condition, we've got to go and hunt them down.
That's basically, it's in the States we call it probation. So anything that's not a felony, so anything misdemeanor-wise in the States, if you aren't going to jail, you can get put on probation for so much time. As long as you don't break the rules in that amount of time, then you're fine, you're good, your tag's gone.
Yeah.
And then if you do break the rules, then you do get extra time for breaking the rules while being on probation and stuff.
Just things like if they were climbing on the roof at the airport or things like that, and then we go and take them to PD and say, look, if we see you at the airport within the next hour, we're just going to come and arrest you.
The thing I want to see brought back is, and I haven't seen it much since it's been back, I did see it once, and it was actually done with me, is the use of community service. I miss making people do community service, going to gas pumps, making them pump gas for people. I've had so many fun times doing that, and I haven't seen that lately. However, when I was put in jail, Killaway pulled me out of jail, and they were doing the ETU training, and I was the guy that was the hostage taker. So
crash test dummy as you were.
Yeah. It was fun.
Things like that do not have to be approved by the government know us. That's something you can do internally.
Yeah, that is actually something, the use of tags is actually something that's been at PD's discretion for quite some time. It's just that, again, I think a lot of people prefer, just following the old idiom of they've done something wrong, put them in jail for it. There are a lot more creative options for punishments, and I think that the use of the tags is one of them.
Yeah, so we can use the tag then at our discretion.
Yeah.
Maybe we should look at something that makes it a bit more
official,
readable, and a bit more official from a PD perspective, so that all officers kind of know the process that they would take. I mean, I know recently the judiciary awarded someone parole on the grounds of doing community service. So, it can be brought in many different ways. Yeah, maybe it just needs to be made a bit clearer, what the process is, what the limits are, maybe what the requirements are for it, what kind of things that you can and can't do with community service as well, because obviously we don't want officers abusing it.
Yeah, obviously if somebody has committed a crime with a weapon, then it's a no-go. But, if you've just picked somebody up for having a fisticuff, then yeah, put them on tag.
Yeah,
okay. Get them to do some community service, get them to clean the airport, public gas, clean the EMT's windows.
Oh.
So little things like that are down to your discretion, because you're the one that's got to deal with the paperwork, and you're the one that has to deal with the punishment. Not all punishments have to come through the courts or the government. They're not under the officer's discretion. So if you want your officers to use the tag system more, then tell them you want to use the tag system more. Like Pickering said, make sure you set a few guidelines so, if somebody's just robbed the bank, they're not going to go out and tag.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, we'll look into that and get something brought up.
I've been dying to say, has the table changed for anybody else?
Yeah, it's gone.
Sunlight.
The logo's not there anymore.
Yeah, the sunlight.
Is it? The sunlight makes it look like, makes it keep the sunlight glass roof.
Yep.
Said that to the Chief Justice and the Senator and the government wanted a glass roof above this room.
Well, I thought we wanted the logo gone, not here.
Well, it's gone when the sun hits it.
No, it's gone when the sun's off it.
Alright, so I get rid of them windows.
So black out the windows.
Yeah.
Or we can get the engineers in to come and sand it down. Okay, anyone else on the subject of tags?
Nope.
You got it.
Mr. Senator, have you got anything on that subject?
Nothing to add, as this is a police matter mainly.
Yeah. I was hoping you maybe be able to offer some insight of how you think the civilian populace would react to being put on tag instead of put in jail.
Well, as the SOP is unknown to me, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that might actually improve the public opinion of the police department if it does not directly end with ending up behind bars. If they have a chance to repay the debt while they're under investigation, basically. Oh, well, while they're on probation, I mean.
Yeah.
I think it will obviously help as well. It gives us the opportunity to maybe give them a slight reduction in a jail time. And, say for example they have a reduction of 45 minutes of their jail time.
User
and
joined your channel.
20 minutes working with us. That's 20 minutes that they're then able to bond or talk or discuss with us. And that's a way of being able to interact with the civilian population a little bit more, and it gives them a chance of rehabilitation. It gives them lots of different extra chances that they obviously don't get just bundled into a jail cell.
Okay.
Just a quick question regarding to tags. Would that be kind of like the American thing where an officer actually don't need a reason to stop and search somebody as long as they're on the tag?
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume so, yeah.
Whatever rules the CLPD have for the parole system and being on tag would then be transferred to if someone's on tag, then rules would apply.
Damn it, I can't give you
If that
tagline.
system goes into the thing, we just got to make sure that's in the law book and stuff.
Punishments
think-
don't need to go on the logbook, do they?
Well, most of them do because the reason that the government website has a list of the punishment, well, the crimes and punishments on it is so that the general population can actually see what they can expect to get for various crimes.
Yeah.
And that also would be nice to protect PD also, so that, you don't have a reason to stop me, I did nothing wrong. Yeah, the drill.
That's
Yeah,
all we're
I
working
mean,
on
I think
descriptions as well.
if we told them that when putting them on tag, like, look, we can come and search you at any point, blah blah blah. If they agree to that, then surely that's they agree to it. So if they disputed it, then we could say, well, I've got it on GoPro that you agreed to them terms when we put you on tag.
Indeed. Okay, so anyone else on this subject? Excellent. Anything else anyone wants to bring up at this point?
Is
I got the
that about
thing at
anything?
the end.
Anything.
Pretty much any...
There was something because that paper coming up earlier on. He stated this is a CLPD restricted zone. According to the limited SOIs on the government website, this is not listed as a restricted zone.
Oh, I stated it as I stated CLPD restricted zones and government buildings, government restricted buildings.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise.
That's all right.
Okay, anything else?
Then I might give it a try, if you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, a little thing that's been bugging me since I had a friend on the civilian side. Some of you might know Count Olaf. The thing kind of bugged me back then is if you're charged with something, you have to say you're guilty or not guilty to all the charges. You can't say you're guilty to some of the charges and not other charges.
You can plead guilty and not guilty to individual charges.
Yep.
Okay, I got told different.
No, you have the right to plead guilty or not guilty to individual charges.
Oh, in that case, I'll sit down again.
That
For
was
me.
not something I was aware of when I was charged at one time. Basically, the officer gave me the entire list of charges and then gave me the option guilty or not guilty. So maybe the officers should also be, maybe they should be required to inform the civilians that they can plead guilty or not guilty partially as well, just so civilians don't actually plead guilty or not guilty, even though they know they committed some crimes and would like to plead guilty, and they could plead not guilty to the other charges. So maybe just for clarification's sake, that they will be informed of that option.
It seems like a lot of
User
I
disconnected
was
from your
not aware
channel.
that people could plead guilty or not guilty to single charges. It just seems like a long-winded process that's going to happen at that point. Because then you have the guilty plea, but then you have the not guilty pleas. So is this basically a not guilty plea because now you have to provide evidence for everything? Is it?
No, you would only have to provide evidence for the charges that they plead not guilty to, and if it turns out there's, if you look back
User
at it
joined
and
your
there doesn't
channel.
seem to be sufficient evidence for those charges can be dropped.
But if there is enough evidence, now they've gotten the not guilty time for those charges.
That's a good point.
I mean,
they're not separate. You have a list of charges, and then it's guilty charge
Guilty
for
or
everything,
not
guilty charge for everything. It's not a charge. They don't have each individual charge listed for both.
And
So
that
it's
would
impossible
in my
to
argument
differentiate.
is kind of wrong.
It would be a lot of mess.
It's kind of out of our hands on that regard.
It is a little bit wrong, yeah, I agree, but it would get very, very, very messy for us.
But can't you calculate on the guilty charges and then non-guilty charges?
Well, then we'd have to separate every single charge. We'd have to separate all of each individual. So we'd have to add up all of the charges that you've pled, and each of the ones then you'd plead guilty to 5 and not guilty to 3. So we'd have to get the overall guilty
User
charge
in your
for the
channel
5,
timed
and then we'd
out.
have to put the not guilty into the calculator each individually.
User joined your channel.
So we get the not guilty charge for each of them and add them all up. It's possible, but it is a massive overhead pain to do.
Yeah, just think about the
I
security of
do agree,
civilians
though.
also, because I know instances where you've been charged for something you've done, and then you have charges on that something you haven't done, and actually don't have a clue of.
Well, I think here in this situation, and maybe this will be the benefit, I feel that if I come to you and I've charged you with 5 different things, and one of those things cannot be proven, then you've won. You've won the not guilty. You're out. You're free. And I think,
No.
I know but it's kind of like,
that could be the smallest charge, though, couldn't it? You know, by that logic, you could be charging someone with terrorism, and they could plead not guilty for explosives and a single illegal item. And you suddenly realise that illegal item is legal. You've got to release them on the terrorism and all the other charges which you could prove.
Yeah, I don't agree on that though, but it should be somewhere that you actually can disagree with some charges if you have a reason for it.
I definitely agree on the logic. It's the complexity from actually getting all the times and stuff, which is something that's at the moment out of our hand. It would take a lot longer for us to process the charges and the times.
As I was saying before I passed out, how much time is added to a not guilty plea if found the evidence is sufficient to charge them?
45%, I think. I think that's what it says in the SOP. It's 25% extra time if you plead not guilty.
So you'd have to work out 25% of every single charge that they're going to plead not guilty and add it on to all the guilty charges. So, like I say, it's doable.
But don't you see
the
time that they're getting charged when you add it in the computer?
No, you see each charge for each crime.
And don't you see the time
and
for
then
each
you
charge?
see the not guilty and the guilty charge as a whole for everything.
Oh.
You don't get to see the guilty and the not guilty for each individual charge.
So if you added the guilty charges and run that through the computer, that will give you one time, right?
Yeah,
what would
which is
happen
what
if
we'd
you
have to do.
add a couple of non-guilty charges?
Hold up, I'll show you an example.
We would have to calculate the charges that you plead guilty to, not the time. Then we would have to calculate the charges that you plead not guilty to, and calculate that time, and then add them two up.
But it's very messy right now.
Sounds easy.
Doesn't the computer give you a breakdown of each crime when you put them in the calculator?
Only for... Well, no, it just gives you the flat rate before any time's taken off.
Yep.
So for, like, drugs, you get 5 hours. It actually says 5 hours. But if you plead guilty, you only get 4 hours, 30 minutes.
But what I'm saying is, when you put the multiple crimes into a computer, are you telling me all you get is a breakdown, the jail time for a guilty plea and a not guilty plea? You do not get a breakdown of each individual charge and each individual time for that charge.
Each individual charge and time, but you do not get the not guilty and the guilty charges. Like we've said, it's
just a flat
it's
rate.
doable on the ground to work out the charges for each individual one, whether when they plead not guilty to each individual charge.
User
But
left your channel.
it's gonna be a massive pain to do. To take each individual charge, add 25% of them, add them all up, and add them to the main charge. It's doable, but it would take extra time on top of the obviously the limited amount of time we're already going to do.
Doing it, then rather than take the chance of putting somebody behind bars for a crime they didn't commit.
I would rather go with than bring it to the judicial system. I think the way it's
that's
currently
what the court's for, yeah.
I think the guilty and not guilty. The guilty saves us. It saves us a lot of work from going through evidence after evidence after evidence. Even if someone's pulling out 2 things, that means we have to gather up evidence. There's more officers that maybe I don't have the video for that now I need to go get video for 2 different things that the guy's pleading not guilty for. And it's basically turned what the time should be for a guilty plea into a lot longer. And I think that's the benefit of a person pleading guilty to everything is there. They get a lot of time off, whereas a person pleading not guilty, yes, we have to do the work and stuff, but I don't know. I understand.
But say if he got 5 charges though, and he played not guilty for 2, wouldn't that save you guys the time instead of him playing not guilty to everything?
No, because we still got to go through evidence. We got to still go through evidence, and now we got to play with the computer to get different charges or times. So I think, and in the instance that a person's charged with something that they did not commit, and they can prove it, because if they pled not guilty to everything, then they'll get compensation for that. However,
yeah, they would get compensation for the not guilty, but they wouldn't get compensation for the lack of the 25% they would get if they pled guilty on the charges they actually wanted to say guilty on.
I don't know.
If I may say something about that.
You can come in, you know. If you can come in.
The wall talking again.
Yeah.
Bloody wolves.
I'm just saying, I mean, PD, I mean, I understand that it takes time for PD to do the paperwork and all that, but it also takes time for the civilian to sit in jail extra because he cannot plead not guilty to some crimes he has not done. So maybe mix somewhere between, so both sides can be happy.
I would say only if we can do that, then the calculator, the computer needs updated before all that happens.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the calculator, when you type the crimes in, you can select on the right side of each crime and choose guilty or not guilty, and it calculates for you. That would be much better.
Wouldn't it be something PD maybe would bring up to the government?
Again, this is something that can be floated up through Chief Justice and the government, the senior government. Obviously, it would take quite a bit of work to get any changes made to the PD computer itself in regards to having a checkbox or something to select guilty or not guilty to each charge. But it will be forwarded to the relevant personnel along with the rest of the ideas from this meeting.
If I may, it just seems like it's in theory it's an okay idea. However, let's just say if somebody got a bunch of charges, right? Maybe let's just say 5 or 6 charges, and they pled not guilty to 1 or 2 charges. And in truth, they don't add up to all time anyhow. Yet, wouldn't that just mean then that if they try to bring that to court, it would change completely how the court would work? Because instead of going and sitting in a courtroom for an hour speaking about the whole case, you're just speaking about 1 or 2 charges.
Well, but going back to what was brought up about the tags, when you're in a situation like that where someone's got about 10, 15 charges against them and they plead guilty to 2 relatively minor ones, there is precedent for the arresting officer to just drop those charges. In either in an attempt to get a guilty plea or just to save both the officer and the suspect a lot of time and hassle by putting them in for the whole not guilty time and then taking it to court later. Again, that sort of thing is at the officer's discretion, as it always has been.
If I may, I just have one question to Mr. Parker in relation to what you said earlier about the hour.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, go
on. You know how you said, or it was stated that if you read them the rights, you give them their evidence. Sorry, you get the charges. You give them list charges. They plead guilty or not guilty. If they plead not guilty, did you say that that time then is void?
Once you read them their charges, read them the rights and read them the charges, that timer then stops. Because like you say, if they've got 5 or 6 charges to go through, you've got a lot to discuss. So that timer stops. And you inform them, look, fair enough, you want to argue the case, let's go, but just bear in mind this is your time that you're wasting. And Yeah, don't say, oh, well, you're wasting my time, because that's just going to make them do it more. Tell them it's their time they're wasting, where they could,
Okay,
Indeed.
because it just seemed that SOP that we had in the brackets where it does state that that's them basically wasting their time. It's just a bit confusing, but thanks for clarification.
But, Tom, I just want to go back to something that Mr. Pickering brought up earlier on about the criminal court case. Now, I'm just reading through one of your SOPs and not guilty plea with evidence. It states that evidence for charge up to 5 hours can be presented in the form of screenshots, making sure that they clearly show the charge is being given. Make sure to show another officer beforehand, ensuring validity and feasibility. Now, that's up to 5 hours. It then states a couple of points down there, charges over 5 hours will be processed in court. So I believe the 10-hour thing is an error on our half, and that's something we need to look into, Mr. Squeezem.
Yeah. If the SOP already says that after 5 hours it should be taken to court, then it is something. It's something that needs to be discussed. But again, we'll discuss that with the Chief Justice.
I don't understand why people are getting confused here, because the SOPs are stating one thing and our system is stating another.
Indeed. Okay, is there anything else to be brought up on this subject? Anyone else? Any comments? Nope. Anyone else got anything else?
I mean,
I was
I'm
told
late.
there was cake.
Yeah, I'm late.
One at a time.
Has the speeding ticket thing been done?
Yeah.
Talked about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Speeding
then I'm
ticket?
good. Yeah.
No, speeding ticket hasn't been done. Parking ticket's been done.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Did Neil
Lieutenant North?
Yes, I do. But
Alright.
seeing how the meeting has progressed this far, basically I went over every single page of the law book. There's a lot of stuff that's either unclear or needs to be addressed. For example, the hunting rifles classification is still in the law book, while it is not in effect in any way. There is no classification. There's just pistol or rifle. But if that is alright with the judges, I just compile a document that they could then look over when they have the time outside of this meeting and pass that on as they see fit.
This is basically what we need is, not just people saying that there's something wrong with this. We need to know what is wrong with it and how it can be fixed.
So if you do that, Mr. Neil, then forward your documentation to me on the government website.
Mm-hmm. I will.
I will then pass it forward to the other judges and the senior government officials, and we will get looked into making a change. Now, obviously on that, if you have any ideas what you believe, what weapons you would like classified as hunting rifles, then obviously put them on, and we'll also look into that. Then that will also be discussed with the commander of the CLPD to make sure they're happy with civilians running around with that class of rifle. And if everybody agrees, then obviously we'll add that in and get it sorted.
That was just an example. For example, another thing would be there's gold bars and diamonds that are being dropped by some generous donator apparently all over the island. But generally, gold bars and yes,
are legal items unless you are caught with them at the black market.
they are legal items, you said?
They are legal items. If
That's
you have a
correct.
gold bar on you now, it is perfectly legal for you to carry gold bars and diamonds. They only become illegal if you're caught with them at the black market.
Oh, that is interesting, because in the law it says that if it can't be obtained in civilian shops, it is considered illegal, so that kind of rules, they fall under that rule, theoretically.
Me and Mr. Squeezem did go through things like that and get government approval to update that information, so it should be on there. If it's not, then we will look into that, because we did add on the list of the items on the government website their legality.
Alright. Well, if that is the case, and if you have gone over it, I guess it would and indeed be the best course of action if I just passed my notes on to you and the other justices, so that could then be passed on after your review.
Yeah.
Alright, I guess that would be most constructive. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Lieutenant North, you tried to say something earlier?
No, I was told there would be cake.
The cake is all I deal with it.
Ah,
Sorry, sir.
Anything else?
Yeah, one quick thing
Okay.
that I think might need clarification. Gun bans. How do we go about putting a gun ban into place? Can we just do that, or I think I heard
What
quite
does
a
your
while
company
ago
say?
it needs. Well, I'm sure someone said it needed to go to court, but I can't find that anywhere.
No.
Let's just have a look.
No.
There isn't really anything in writing on it, but there is nothing necessarily to say it goes to court. It's on the officer's discretion, really. It's kind of similar. It's pretty much linked into the tag system, where it's something that we have and we are authorised to use on our own regard. It's just something that we need to sit down and work out kind of regulation on when officers should and shouldn't authorise tag time or and gun bans, things like that, and who maybe who in PD is able to authorise them. But there's nothing, as far as I know, that has ever regarded it to have to go to court.
What does it say on your computer? Because that information will also be useful to help us put forward.
On the police computer, you mean?
Yeah, so what would... Does any time when you put a crime in the computer, does it come up stating there should be a gun ban issued?
Well, I thought it did at one point, but when I
haven't
checked
seen it.
No, I haven't seen it either. So maybe I just imagined it.
Okay, can I have your permission, Commander, to log on to the police computer?
Yeah, sure.
She said no.
Okay, found it. So, unlicensed rifle, it does come up saying gun ban and court hearing. Now, it doesn't state that the gun ban has to be decided by the courts. I can see where that confusion may have come if somebody's seen that. But it is quite complicated. It just says gun ban
Can I
and
access
court
the
hearing.
account from here?
Yeah, that's kind of another reason is why we're looking into the descriptions of all the charges, that we want to kind of get them into routine so they are a bit clearer.
I kind of feel like it should be up to the court to decide, but then I think, well, like you said, it could take 2 or 3 days to get that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of pointless. Maybe, if we... Obviously, we're not going to abuse it anyway. I don't think anyone's ever used it. But we should be able to use it if we need to.
I'll put like a couple on. I put like attempted murder, unlicensed rifle, unlicensed weapon, unholstered weapon, and the only one that come up with that description was the unlicensed rifle.
Yeah, I think that's why I didn't find it then, because I put like murder, all that kind of stuff in, and it never came up.
The main way to look at them is think of a tag time. You want to give someone tag time, but if all their charges are to do with vehicles or all their charges are to do with weapons, tag time may not be relevant, and something like a gun ban for an equal amount of time might be more beneficial. Take a driving ban, for example. It's a bit more easy to kind of describe. If someone's a dangerous driver or a drunk driver, you might give them an hour's driving ban. Whereas giving them tag time isn't necessarily going to stop them driving, whereas something like that might. Same as a gun ban, it's the fact that it stops them being able to get access to the guns. That's what it's there for. I mean, it's not there to be used for hours. It's a small time deterrent for a little bit to allow them to kind of learn from their mistake or calm down or allow us to release them with a bit reduced time, similar to a tag.
Well, that was my next question, is what does a driving ban and a gun ban actually do?
Yeah,
it stops people from doing the licenses and buying them.
And accessing shops, yeah.
Ah, right. Okay.
Obviously, it doesn't physically stop them driving, but it's just an extra thing there. We'll have to sit down on it, work out some regulation on it, and make it a bit more clear to officers.
I don't know
how we do it.
Mr. Squeeze will agree with me here. But as far as gun bans are concerned, I would say again, it's down to the officer's discretion.
Yeah, it's something it always has been, but I think it's obviously been made a bit not so clear there.
Yeah.
So
I think
why it's confusing, because it says gun
Yeah.
ban and court hearing. Now that could mean it's got to go to court, but it could also mean you can issue the gun ban, but he's also got to go to court to why you had an unlicensed rifle.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be some sort of clarification there in some way or another. So again, that will be floated up the chain of command, and we'll see what the result of that is.
It makes it maybe, because of the confusion, maybe that's why the officers aren't using the likes of the tags in the gun bans and the driving bans.
Yeah. It would be good to see them used a lot more.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else on this subject?
Nope.
Nope. Anybody else on any subject?
What time we're going to the ball?
Daniel's just unravelling his big list.
Oh
The
dear.
mayor sacked Walls.
I didn't think you were going to say list.
Didn't even think we had a mayor.
User in your channel timed
That's a
out.
very strange wall.
Daniel's list is on a toilet roll.
I think he's fell asleep.
Mr. Senator?
Quick, all fan out before he wakes up.
Yeah, quick, land it!
Mr. Senator.
Higher on the table.
I have returned.
Okay. Didn't even know you were going anywhere.
Oh,
Is there anything else?
not on my part, no.
Okay, well
User entered your channel.
maybe he was pretending to have a massive list.
Yeah.
No, the massive list would actually completely blow this meeting out of the water, but it's a lot of law questions. That's why I propose just passing that on to you in a written form.
Yeah. Okay, well that's I don't see going through that entire list at the moment because we're up to almost 2 hours already. So if there's nothing else apart from a slightly suicidal EMT over here.
He's just having a kip.
I want to thank all those that actually showed up tonight.
Yep.
The thing
fun.
that I want to say is that we're actually seeing new people on the server. Yep. So thank you guys for showing up. I know it was kind of short notice. I know we've wanted to do it for a long time, but I wanted to get the ball rolling and just get it done.
User left your channel.
Alright. Have you got a rough time scale of when we'll hear anything back, or?
I'm not at all sure at the moment because I know the Chief Justice himself and the most senior government officials are actually on LOA at the moment. So once we get this, once they get back, we'll have them look into this and see what we can come up with.
Gives you a couple of days to get all your paperwork and that's sent home and get it.
I'll also
all
get
done.
Indeed.
I'll also get these laws done. Well, the crime descriptions done and stuff like that, so we can get that passed to you.
No, I'll be back on helping you on that this weekend. So.
Thanks, man.
Okay, excellent. Well, if there's nothing else to be brought up, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm gagging for a shower.